With rumors of a Nintendo Direct happening soon and the upcoming Generation 8 Pokemon games coming out in 2019, it's safe to assume that we might get some more information about these new Pokemon games in the upcoming Nintendo Direct. Personally, I'm very excited to have a more proper Pokemon game on the Nintendo Switch, but I do have some of my concerns. Both Let's Go and the Generation 7 games on the 3DS were polarizing amongst Pokemon fans due to the differences they had over other Pokemon games amongst some other reasons. In this video, we'll talk about some of the concerns I have about the upcoming Pokemon game, and of course, be sure to leave a like and subscribe as it really does help the channel a ton. Now, I'm sure that I will personally enjoy the next Pokemon game, as there hasn't been a Pokemon game that I actually disliked. My least favorite Pokemon games are easily Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. However, Let's Go became one of my favorites in the series, despite being one of the most hated in the series. This doesn't change the fact that there's still a lot of people unhappy with Let's Go, and even though most of the people that hate on Let's Go haven't even played the game in the first place, they still have a sour taste in their mouth for Pokemon, so Pokemon will have to win those fans back again with Generation 8. Now, my first concern about this new Pokemon game is this is the first proper Pokemon game we're having on the Switch. Yes, we did have Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee last year, but those games were largely remakes, and they were pretty much not the same as older Pokemon games. I know they consider them mainstream and stuff like that, but I'm sure you guys are aware there were a lot of differences, a lot of things cut from these games that made them very different. And it's not exactly a new game as it was based on an older region. Being the first game on a new console can be pretty scary, especially when you consider the fact that Generation 4 had a lot of issues with the hardware limitations of the DS, which is why the 4th generation games don't run too well on the system, although they did correct it with Generation 5. Now, since they did have some experience programming on the Switch with Let's Go, maybe that'll be different. Hopefully it is. Either way, being the first proper game on a new console does raise some concerns. Now, if we were to go back to Let's Go had different catching mechanics which were not very well liked, and just a lot of overall differences. No held items, no abilities. What will we see for the new Pokemon game? Will we see held items come back? Will we see held items not be in the game? Will there be breeding again? How is it going to be compared to Let's Go? Personally, I think they will bring back abilities and all those other things. However, the catching mechanic is still up in the air for me. I can very easily see them sticking to the Pokemon Go route of catching Pokemon, which personally I don't care that much about. I do prefer the older method, but this is something that a lot of fans did not like. Probably the biggest concern I have now is the general hand-holdy nature Pokemon has had over the last few games. Now, Let's Go wasn't terribly hand-holdy, but the Generation 7 games were ridiculously hand-holdy and had way too many cutscenes, which is the biggest reason why I wasn't such a fan of these games. Most of the game is just you being told exactly what to do and exactly how to do it, with a lot of cutscenes, most of which honestly aren't exactly needed. I feel like cutscenes are fine if they are well paced and they progress the story a lot, but a lot of the Generation 7 cutscenes were just there for no reason, it seemed like. Now, as for the hand-holder thing, that is something we've seen a lot in recent Pokemon games, especially starting with Generation 6, how the EXP share was handled, how everything has EXP share, basically. That's a pretty big concern a lot of people had. Even in Let's Go, you couldn't turn off the EXP share, which was a pretty big concern as well. So hopefully these games aren't as hand-holdy and aren't as easy as Pokemon games have been in the past recent years. I understand Pokemon is targeted more as a younger demographic, but I do wish we could still return to form like we've had in Generation 3, 4, and 5, where the games weren't as easy. Sure, they were still easy because they are Pokemon games, but they're not just a walk in the park where you could play without even really thinking. Now, according to this article about the next Pokemon games that I found on IGN, quote, the Pokemon Company's 2019 game will feature better graphics than any other prior Pokemon game seen before. It will be an entirely new experience featuring new Pokemon and will be aimed towards seasoned fans of the series. Now, seasoned fans of the series is a little bit ambiguous, I would say, because I feel like Let's Go was targeted towards seasoned fans of the series. However, there were a lot of quote-unquote seasoned fans who weren't a fan of these games. Now, again, I feel like the majority of people that have actually played these games do actually like Let's Go, but there are people out there who've been around since Generation 1 or even Generation 2, longtime Pokemon fans, who were not a fan of these games, who are considered seasoned fans, so hopefully these games will appeal to those fans as well. Now, in that quote, they did mention how this will be an entirely new experience. This could mean that we could see more changes like we saw in Let's Go, or Let's Go could have been more of a testing ground to see how people like the changes, such as the changing the catching mechanics and the omission of abilities and things like that. Now, I have a feeling this also could be sort of a soft reboot for the series, kind of like what we saw in Generation 5, which again wasn't a very popular generation, But they did say that this upcoming Pokemon game for the Switch will be a more traditional Pokemon game, whatever that means, because that is rather ambiguous. And that still could mean a lot of change, as Sun and Moon and Let's Go are considered traditional games by Game Freak as well. And especially Sun and Moon, they changed a lot of things with how the gym mechanics works, how there are pretty much no gyms, now you have the kahunas and stuff like that. And of course, all the changes in Let's Go, which I've talked about throughout this entire video. Now the next concern I have is, what will the gimmick be for this generation? Now this is something that was more prominent with Generation 6 onwards, as with Generation 6 we saw Mega Evolution, which I personally am a huge fan of. Although it was rather polarizing, it was a cool thing. Then with Generation 7 we saw the Z moves, of course, which were the souped up powerful moves. What will we see in the Generation 8 games? Now Let's Go was interesting, because Let's Go had Mega Evolution with the Pokemon that were featured in the game, however no Z moves because there were no held items. This is pretty interesting to me because it tells me that maybe for the next game they'll go back to Mega Evolution and do more of a focus on that, maybe add some new Megas, which I think would be amazing, or maybe they'll have their own unique gimmick like we've seen in Gen 6 and Gen 7, having their two unique things. Now the problem with this is, what else could they do? And I feel like we probably could have said this for the past 5 generations, what else could they do, but they still keep doing more, so this really isn't the biggest concern. But realistically, what could they do? Could we see triple type moves, or dual type moves I should say, triple type Pokemon? Could we see Pokemon Fusion? Pokemon Fusion is something that I think would be really, really cool. I feel like that will be a little polarizing. I feel like a lot of people will not like the idea of Pokemon fusing. Now Pokemon Fusion is something that we haven't really seen too explored outside of Generation 5 with the Kyrums. So I do think it's something that'll be very interesting to see if they can pull it off correctly, because I feel like just the whole notion of Pokemon Fusion will turn a lot of fans off, and just the idea of it will be something that they aren't a fan of. Definitely walking on eggshells here if they end up doing that. So I'm really curious to see what gimmick, if they have some sort of gimmick, we'll see in this game, but I'm pretty sure we'll see something as we saw something in Gen 6 and Gen 7 that were both pretty major. Now the next concern that I have has to do with Pokemon Bank and transferring Pokemon. Will we be able to transfer Pokemon from older games, from Pokemon Go, from Let's Go, into this new Pokemon game? Will Pokemon Go influence the Switch game like introduced Let's Go in terms of transferring Pokemon? Now Masuda said this quote in an article about transferring Pokemon, quote, "There have been times where you couldn't bring Pokemon over from previous titles. I imagine that created some bad memories. I want to try and change that if I can." Now this isn't 100% guaranteed that we will be able to transfer Pokemon from older games into the Generation 8 Pokemon Switch game, but it means that at least Masuda wants you to be able to, which is a good sign. Now cross-platform transferring is a little bit tricky, especially considering the fact that the Switch isn't backwards compatible with the 3DS, just like other older Pokemon games were backwards compatible with the previous generation's hardware. For example, if you want to transfer Pokemon to Pokemon Pearl, you could do it on your DS, which is backwards compatible with the Game Boy Advance. If you want to transfer to your 3DS, it was backwards compatible with the DS, so on and so forth. So it really wasn't that difficult to do for the older games, but transferring from the 3DS to the Switch could cause some problems. Now, if they do end up doing some sort of cloud system like Bank, that'd be cool, but that raises another question. Will you have to pay for Pokemon Bank, or will it be free with the Switch? Because with the Switch, to play online, you have to pay $20 a year for the premium, whatever it's called, to play online. Will they make you pay another fee just to be able to transfer Pokemon? Because people will be unhappy with that. Even if it's cheap like it is in the past, I think it's $5 a year for Pokemon Bank, that extra $5 on top of the subscription you already have to Nintendo Switch Online is definitely something that we do not want to see as Pokemon fans, and does raise a concern. Now, I am seeing some reports saying that Junichi Masuda said this will be his last time being lead director of a Pokemon game, being with the new Pokemon game on the Switch, which does raise some concerns because now he is the guy that has been directing Pokemon since Pokemon Red version, so nobody really knows better than him how to direct a Pokemon game. Once he's gone, what will happen with Pokemon? Pokemon is probably going to see a lot of changes, even more than they've seen in the past, and that's not really something I'm excited to see, if I'm being perfectly honest. Now, on the bright side, since this is most likely his last game, he could go out with a bang, pull out all the stops, and produce something that's completely mind-blowing, something like maybe a Breath of the Wild or Mario Odyssey-esque game for Pokemon, which is something a lot of people have been speculating we will get for the next Pokemon game on the Switch. A lot of people thought we'd get that with Let's Go, but Let's Go really wasn't like that, unfortunately. So hopefully with this new Generation 8 game, we see something like that. Something I'd personally be a fan of is a more open world style Pokemon game. I'm sure you've seen tons of videos, tons of those quote-unquote leaks saying that this will be an open world Pokemon game, and I'm sure you're probably sick of it, But I think it'll be really, really fun to have bigger towns, more exploration. I feel like Pokemon needs to have more of a focus on exploration because, especially the last couple of generations, especially Generation 7, it was very, very linear with how you progress through the game, and there really wasn't that much room for exploration. A lot of the times I'm playing through Sun and Moon or Sun and Ultra Moon, I was going down a route and it was just one straight road and that's it. And it's not really fun or exciting. So hopefully with this game there's more exploration, and that's pretty much all of my concerns. Now again, this was an unscripted video. I don't know if I said that. This was largely unscripted. I had a few things written down, but for the most part it was unscripted. Definitely trying to focus more on doing more unscripted videos. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve because I feel like I do have that issue where I repeat myself a lot like I did in the last unscripted video. So hope this one turns out better. Still I'm a little bit sick, so I have to edit out a lot of calls from this video. So I do apologize about that. Either way, what do you guys think of the next Pokemon game? What are your concerns? Are you excited? Are you not excited? Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Have a great rest of your day. I will see you guys next time, and bye-bye.